question. Why do Kenyans vote for clowns? Why do we vote for clowns, right? Why do we vote for clowns? So we have our guests with us already. They're here in studio. But let's see also what happened last week on the Leadership Forum. The Soapbox is up next.
What are you doing to really feel alive? Are we caught up in the planning of life, planning outcomes, trying to control outcomes, many of which are actually an exercise in futility? How many times and how many of us took time to say, this year I'm going to be happier. This year I'm going to seek balance. This year I'm going to seek to serve. This year I'm going to try and get closer to that connection for the purpose that I came on this earth.
If we are able to live with meaning, every day is filled with purpose, every day is given to something that's really important or significant, then I believe that we'll be able to finish well.
Life is too short for you to give up. The fact that you're alive today means that God has a plan for your life. You still have another day to make it happen.
We have the power in our hands to make decisions between life and and when we go.
Right, those were the guests last week, but today we have this guest here. The guest profiles is up next. Our guests today in studio, and of course the topic of our discussion is how we elect our leaders. You know the drill of how it happens. Every Friday, of course, they are on the lectern to make the presentation, and already we have with us Dr. Oliver Kisaka, who is on standby at the lectern right now to also tell us on this particular story and the probing question that was on the front page of the Daily Nation yesterday. Why do we vote, or we as Kenya or Kenyans voting for clowns? Dr. Oliver Kisaka, you've got 5 minutes beginning now.
Thank you, Debarl, and my fellow panelists this morning. Happy New Year, and Happy New Year to you, Kenyans. It's a great privilege to be discussing this morning, although the subject of our discussion is something that causes great disturbance as we reflect as a people. Why do Kenyans vote for clowns? It's amazing that in the journey of our growth from our individual ethnic communities in pre-independence Kenya to a national status where we are together, a nation state, living together, working together, there needed to have been a transformation in our way of thinking and operations that seems to have stalled somewhere in between, or that seems to reflect that some people are much more ahead of others in the game. And so the question of leadership in Kenya is a question which divides Kenyans, because some see it as an opportunity for personal gain, others see it as something to look forward to for hope for their future. A few people have found the opportunity, understood the game, are ahead of the rest, and are playing it in a way that is surprising Kenyans who have not taken time to reflect and think on what needs to happen. For example, the gentlemen and ladies that are called clowns today, if you are to reflect back and think how they came into public limelight, you will see it was out of taking amazing radical actions in society, like banging walls, throwing stones, and the rest. And that's how they came into the public limelight. Kenyans began to see them as people who hold hope, people who can fight for them, people who can actually dare anybody and stand against them. And if you are to look at most of the leaders that are in power today, you would see that they are there because their communities see them as the people who can dare the rest of society on behalf of the community. So I would like to look at just three things. First, what I consider the ethnic problem. We are in a situation where ethnic communities go into the public space to seek benefit for their ethnic community. And when they are choosing leaders, they discriminate on the basis of who best can go into the society, cut out profits for us and bring them back to the community. These profits are reflected in terms of how many of our people can be employed, how many of them can return to the community. And so ethnicity becomes an agency that we use to try and get as much as possible from the common nation state for our people. If you don't have your person there, you probably will get nothing. The second one I call the values problem, and Kenyans are aware of values problem. They have even espoused it in the constitution in an attempt to look for leaders that are good leaders. But we fail here because those who present themselves as leaders come through the ethnic door and not the values door. Nobody is asking questions on values. We do not realize that like a farmer, a nation must think in terms of times of sowing, times of caring for crops, and times of harvest. If we don't sow what is good for ourselves, we do not expect to harvest what is good later. And the third one I call the poverty problem. I can only describe this in terms of the conflicting occurrences of situations in Africa today. Why, for example, are our African young people dying on the Mediterranean, struggling to get out of Africa to pursue a better life in Europe and other places, when at the very same time, Chinese are coming into Africa in droves, thinking that the opportunities in Africa are unlimited? There is a perception problem here. We see ourselves as poor and unable to turn our situation around and are looking for somebody who is providing easy answers, instead of a willingness to be patient, to work hard, to define the direction we want to go, and to work at it until we get it. I invite Kenyans this morning to think seriously that leadership is not just about picking anybody who presents themselves out there as one fighting for us. It is about defining a future, working towards that future persistently. We need to be a people that add the value of sacrifice towards a common good direction. We may sacrifice our ethnicities, we will sacrifice our opportunities, we will sacrifice our fame, but we are working together towards a common good. Kenyans need to espouse a value like maintenance. We need to be aware that all things need to be maintained. Whether it's a garden or a car or a bicycle or a country, all things need to be maintained. The concept of maintenance must be restored. We need to resolve the poverty problem. If you go to a buffet and you are thinking about the hunger in your head and not the size of your stomach, you are likely to serve more than you can chew and throw away the food. I think we need to shift. We are not a poor people. God has given us great resources, great ideas. We are a great people. We just need to sit down, organize ourselves, and this time go past the popularist leaders and try to get leaders that can actually work us towards a common direction. There's hope for Kenyans. Let's reorganize ourselves and move forward in a positive way. God bless you, Kenyans.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Oliver Kisaka. And we've picked some silent points there that we shall be raising during the program as well when we sit down and talk with the panelists. Up next, who's working over now there is Professor Dominic Mwenja, who is the CEO of Mater Hospital. Right, let's just begin right away because of interest of time. You've got 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Debarl. Good morning, panelists. Good morning, Kenyans. Today we've been talking about leaders and leadership for a long time, but today I want us to reflect on who is that leader that I want. And looking at this, this headline about electing clowns, I have a few more adjectives. Clowns, we elect thieves, we elect thugs, we elect priests, we elect all kinds of manner of people into our political leadership. But then I have to ask our people, as you elect your people and you look at your leaders, we say that you sleep in the bed that you make. Did you elect a thief? Do you elect a thug? Do you elect a nice person? Do you elect somebody who cares? That is the bed that we make, and therefore we have to deal with the consequences. This is the leader that I look for. So the question I'm asking you, Kenyan, is this a leader that you look for? And I'll give you several points. 1, a leader who is fair and objective. 2, a leader who moves oneself above oneself and serves the people. 3, is not seeking fame and attention. 4, is not hiding the truth for the sake of looking good. 5, is focused on specific, achievable and measurable goals and outcomes and demands outcomes. 7, encourages people to be accountable for their action. 8, does not pay attention to be politically correct but ethically correct. 6 or 9, does not make idealistic promises but realistic ones. A leader who is honest, even if it doesn't benefit him or her. A leader who thinks globally but acts locally. A leader who takes personal responsibility for everything that he or she does. A leader who has a curious mind and always want to find ways of solving our problems as a society and as a people. A leader who does not make himself look good by making others look bad. So as we look at all those qualities, what I want you Kenyans to do is, as you reflect on the leaders that you have put in positions of power, do they exhibit those characteristics? And if they did before you elected them, when they go to Parliament or the Senate or whichever political position they get into, do they change? Then we have to ask ourselves, why do they change? Because we have honest people that when they're campaigning, they're honest. People who are promising, but then they go to Aga's house and they change. The question we have to ask ourselves is why? I like to tell people, when you look at issues, look into the mirror and not through the mirror. Let me explain that again. Look through the mirror, into the mirror, not through the mirror. When you look through the mirror, you see yourself in reflection of others. When you look into the mirror, you see yourself for who you are. So when you make that decision on the ballot box, and it's coming soon, look into the mirror and see yourself and ask yourself, is the decision that I made good for this country, for my family, for myself? And is this person going to take this country to the next level? But there's a common denominator among our people when we go to the ballot box. We're looking for those who are loudest sometimes, those who will promise but sometimes not deliver. And the poverty index in this country has led us to be deceived by our leaders in so many ways and directions. So we have to ask ourselves, how do we get out of this mess that we created? It's only up to you, my fellow Kenyans. Look into the mirror and not through the mirror. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. And of course, he's run us through a list of what we should be actually looking for a leader when you're actually electing a leader. Fair and objective, move above oneself, not seeking for fame and acclamation. Also, not politically, not seeking to be politically correct, but ethically correct as well, amongst others, that we'll be discussing much later in the course of the program. Right, up next we have George Njenga, Reverend John Njenga, who's a co-founder and a director, Dispute and Conflict Resolution International, is up on the lectern right now. Sir, you got 5 minutes.
Good morning, and thank you for the chance to address this problem. Watching news every evening is not difficult to discover that we have enough clowns as leaders in this country. So I am not quite worried that somebody has discovered to make that a headline, because it is true. I think we fail to capture the essence of leadership and the impact of leadership as we elect and put people in positions of leadership. We fail to accept, appreciate, acknowledge that leadership is the most important ingredient in any human endeavor, and what you put in there will determine failure or success. And because we have chosen to put more and more clowns in leadership, it is no wonder, therefore, that we don't seem to be getting anywhere. We keep to be going round and round in circles. So why is this state of affairs a reality? Firstly, I think we have trivialized leadership. I think we have trivialized leadership and moved away from developing useful leadership. We have equated leadership to friendship, that if you're my friend, then you can be a good good leader. Not necessarily so. We have also glorified thieves and charlatans and busybodies. We have picked people who did not lead anything in particular and given them the crucial role of leading the nation. We have decided that leadership is about family lineage, that if my father was a big leader, I too, I have the genes to lead. That is not necessarily true. Again, we have made leadership a quick avenue to instant riches. And therefore, anybody who wants to be rich quickly without necessarily working will be attracted to leadership. We've also moved away from long-term in thinking about leadership to short-term mentality. And that short-term mentality is the province of politicians. A politician thinks about the next elections. It is no wonder, therefore, that as soon as we close one election, we are thinking about the next one, because by nature, that's how politicians think. Now, if you have enough clowns, then you have muddied the water big time. Statesman, in contrast, a statesman thinks about the next generation and therefore will invest for the long term. In this country, we have tended to blame the masses for electing the kind of people we have. I don't quite subscribe to that thinking wholly, because we are dealing with vulnerable people. A person in Baba's bedroom, living in there, 500 shillings is a matter of life and death for him. 100 shillings is a matter of life and death for him. So when clowns go to dance there and give 100 shillings, people will flock there and elect them. We need to re-educate the masses. We need to reach out to them and help them. We've moved away from a leadership on merit. we moved away from electing people who merit. And therefore, we've allowed the bottom to come to the top. Because, you know, we are looking for the roughest, we are looking for the loudest, and the bottom has obviously come to the top. My colleague has talked about tribal thinking, which I believe is a threat to devolution. If in the devolved units, all we are thinking about is our people in that region, we will destroy what I believe is the best thing that has happened in this country, devolution about our people. And finally, I think the ruling class simply does not care. I think they are so caught up with the living for today, their power and glory, they really don't care. They don't quite want to understand that leadership is about making tough decisions. It's about loneliness, even betrayal. Are we willing to pay the price? And obviously, we have abandoned ethical leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Reverend George Njenga, who's also listed some of the things that we do as Kenyans. We've trivialized leadership and moved away from, from actually streamlining leadership with people with credibility and ability of character to equating leadership to friendship. So if I'm your friend, then and I come and ask for that particular vote, on that basis, then I will vote for you, amongst others as well. Quick avenue to instant reaches, that is another one. We shall be also looking at this much later. Let's hear from Dr. Frank Njenga, who's already also on the lectern. He's a consultant psychiatrist. So you got 5 minutes beginning now.
I have just 3 things to say this morning. The first is that even the devil is entitled to a hearing. The secondly, I would like to say that in my experience, the majority of the leaders that we have in Kenya are good men and women. So the question before us is, why does a small number of buffoons make so much noise that they appear to be the only people in positions of leadership? I recall, since independence, every parliament has had its own share of clowns. Famously, Charles Njonjo talked about the 7 bearded sisters, Georgia Nyona, James Orengo, Koigi Wamore, among others. Every leader who has been capable of being described as a clown has had his own noisy contribution to make. The one common denominator that in my view defines these so-called clowns and the reasons that we vote for them, first of all, is because the clowns present themselves. Good men and women are reluctant to present themselves. And a good question we should be asking, and John Kamau should have asked this, is why do good men not present themselves to be elected in sufficient numbers to outshine the clowns that come before us? Now, I will continue to muddy these waters by saying the following. In Her Majesty's government in the United Kingdom, there is a minister, at least in the previous government before Johnson's, there was a minister in charge of suicide prevention. The Minister for Suicide Prevention was put in place because it was recognized that in Her Majesty's government in the United Kingdom, about 35% of the members of parliament had very special mental health needs. This is Her Majesty's government, not in Kenya. Kenya, I'm sure, is better than that. A friend of mine looked historically at all men who had been presidents in the United States of America since the beginning of the presidency. To his shock and horror, mine as well, 50% of all the men who have been presidents in America have had diagnosable mental disorders, from alcoholism depression, and so on. The same fellow, friend of mine, looked at all the British prime ministers until Blair. To his shock and horror, the British were doing better. There are 70% of prime ministers who have had a mental health need of one sort or another. What does that tell you? It tells me two things. One, that presidents and prime ministers are human beings, which is an important point. Secondly, that people who present themselves for positions of leadership perhaps are more prone to various mental health conditions than the general public. In recognition of this, Her Majesty's government, the Parliament, has a special unit, just like you have in university and in schools, that gives counseling to the members of Parliament. And I can assure you, it is a very, very busy unit. In a recent study, again, in the last Parliament, large numbers of people have been found in that Parliament to have various forms of illnesses. I'm a historian of sorts. Did Adolf Hitler, the Third Reich, have a mental illness? I don't know, but he certainly was an exceedingly paranoid individual, a man who showed hysterical blindness, and a man who perhaps did suffer from one form of illness or another. Sir Winston Churchill clearly won the Second World War in a state of mania. He suffered from a bipolar mood disorder, which was well recognized and for which he received some treatment. Abraham Lincoln, the greatest American president of all time, suffered from such severe depression. Now, what point am I making? I am making the following point, that this devil that we call clowns in leadership possibly require the care they do not receive. Perhaps this is a time for us as Kenyan, and now I speak as a leader of the mental health task force, took a look at our leaders and humanized them and said, these ladies and gentlemen who present themselves for leadership positions might be like other presidents or other parliamentarians we have seen in other jurisdictions, and perhaps are not as bad as we think they are. Let us put this case on its head and say, it's just possible our leaders are human beings and you must treat them like fellow human beings. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Frank Jenga. Our leaders are human beings that we should treat them as human beings. But, you know, they present themselves for elections, and that's why we also elect them as well. We want to take a short break right now. When we circle back, we'll hear from Mary Mukindia, who is already on the podium as it is right now. And remember to hit us on Twitter. AM11TV is the Twitter handle, AM11TV our profile name on Facebook, and 20686 our SMS portal. So a lot of issues coming to the fore, and we've picked on some of the selling points they've raised that we shall tease out on the